Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aldi, and some of you may know me as the CEO of a company in Indonesia called Ruma. I'm here in my capacity as the board chair for RiverGen. And there's Darren from my ex-colleague at Kiva, and my brother Arno. And I guess I want to tell you a little bit about the story about how the idea for RiverGen started. So I was in a classroom in Harvard Business School. My professor, Michael Porter, was teaching a case about Costa Rica. And he said that, Costa Rica has all this clean energy, 80% of the power comes from hydro. And, he said, Aldi, Costa Rica has almost the exact same geographical characteristics as Indonesia. And why isn't Indonesia using hydropower? So that got me thinking about this business idea. And I think one big problem that I found while doing the research was that actually a lot of people in Indonesia don't have power still, 90 million people to be exact. And I think as the population grows and the economy grows, this is one of the key problems in Indonesia, is that electricity in rural areas, a key staple for development, is not present. And I think the second problem with Indonesia is that we have a lot of coal. I mean, it's a good thing because we have energy to sell to China for power plant, for power and things like that. But from an environmental perspective, because coal is so easily accessible in Indonesia, it makes it very difficult for us to justify having economically sustainable clean energy sources. And I think because of the geographical characteristics of Indonesia, with really tall mountains and short rivers, I think hydro, we believe, is one of the key potential areas for development. In fact, we have about 235 gigawatts of untapped mini hydropower in Indonesia. So when we talk about hydropower plants, people talk about the Three Gorges Dam, like very, very bad big plants that submerge entire villages and damage aquatic life. So we have those types of plants in Indonesia. They're big, big plants, almost 1 gigawatt all over different parts of the country. But there's a couple of problems with these types of plants, actually. The first one is the environmental impact. When you make a big dam, you have to change the landscape. You'll have people's livelihoods will be affected. And the top, you have aquatic life changed. The entire ecosystem, the climate often for that particular area does change significantly. And the second problem is that with a big plant, you don't actually get to involve the community. Community is usually it's a government initiative. They say, okay, we're building this plant, you guys should all leave, we'll give you a plot of land somewhere else, right? And that's something that we want to change. That's why we want to create RiverGen. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create Indonesia's leading company that builds and develops mini hydropower plants. So these are plants between 5 to 10 megawatts, very small, that doesn't stop the run of the river, so that irrigation can still run. And because these plants are so small, the community involvement is very important, because any change in the behavior upstream, cutting illegal logging, farming, different things that are done by the community, has a significant impact on the bottom line, which is the flow of the river. Okay? Darren's going to talk about solution.
So what we're trying to actually develop is what we call run-of-river mini hydro plants. As Aldi had mentioned, these are plants less than 10 megawatts and do not require any damming. You can see the illustration above basically gives you the basic layout of a mini hydro plant. It simply diverts water into a powerhouse before returning it to the river downstream. On the left-hand side, you'll see an actual 9 megawatt power plant. As you can see, the actual footprint is significantly much smaller than that of a large hydro project. These are the type of projects that RiverGen is looking to develop. So what is actually needed to develop a mini hydro project? You really need 3 components. First, you need a team of skilled engineers that can identify, design, and evaluate a mini hydro site. Secondly, you need a project management team that can ensure sites are built and operated on time and on budget. And lastly, you actually need a team that can actually raise the funds needed to develop the mini hydro sites. At RiverGen, we think we've put together the strongest team because we actually represent the integration of 2 existing mini hydro companies. On the technical side, we have Neruli Energy Utama, whose core team consists of 4 civil and mechanical engineers, each with over 20 years of experience developing hydro projects in Indonesia. On the project management side, we have Indonesia Energy, the subsidiary of our anchor investor, whose core team consists of 10 project managers with 10 to 25 years experience each in the Indonesian construction industry. And finally, in terms of actually structuring the entity and raising the funds, you have RiverGen's management team, which consists of myself, who has a background in private equity and social enterprise, Riano Haryobowo, who previously worked in the infrastructure division of a large Indonesian private equity fund and has actually financed several hydro projects, and our student representative, Fuad Satrio, who unfortunately could not be here because he is defending his master's thesis this weekend. And as Aldi mentioned, supporting us is actually two board members. Aldi, who is the CEO of the fastest growing social enterprise in Indonesia, and Pakiman Naruli, who has over 25 years experience in the hydro sector. Now, because we are integrating two existing companies, RiverGen will start its operations with up to 5 sites ready for construction. In addition, both companies will be transferring over their pipelines to RiverGen, which represents up to 17 sites totaling 135 megawatts. In addition, we're actively looking to acquire existing mini hydro sites and have already identified 17 acquisition targets totaling 135 megawatts. In total, given our pipeline, we are more than confident we'll be able to develop 100 megawatts over the next 5 years. Now, in terms of financial returns, we project we'll be able to return investors a 12% return on debt and a 20% return on equity target hurdle rate, which is based off sensitivity analysis between 19 and 26%. These are based off of the following key assumptions. On the revenues, Indonesian regulation actually guarantees a fixed tariff rate of 7 cents per kilowatt hour, and this rate is set to increase by up to 40% in May. On the revenue side, based on our team's experience, construction costs will be around $2 million per installed megawatt with a construction period of 2 years. Operating expenses will be about 8% of total revenues, and there will be a total operations period for each site of up to 15 years. And lastly, we have set aside 5% of total equity as incentives for the management teams. Now, an important aspect, as Aldi had mentioned, is the community programs. Because mini hydro relies on run-of-river, the upstream area in terms of the watershed becomes very important. What RiverGen will do is try to work with the communities. And so currently, right now, when we go to a mini hydro site, we actively talk with the communities and see what they're doing. Oftentimes, we find illegal mining and illegal logging activities going on. And so what we have done with our current sites is we actually have given the farmers in the upstream areas seeds such as mango trees to plant and have taught them on how to take care of the forest habitat upstream. What we'll do in the future is we want to upgrade this program to really be able to meet the IFC's environmental and social governance standards. And what we'll do with this, for example, it's because 90% of the labor during the construction process will be from the local community. We will begin job training programs so that they'll be able to translate this, their construction skills into future projects and into future employment opportunities. And so when we talk about our projected social value, we project that we will create over $63 million of social value. And this is really broken down into 3 key components. The first one is by being an alternative to large hydro projects, we believe we can command at least a 1% premium upon our investor exit. Secondly, we calculated the amount of carbon emissions we'll have diverted by calculating the amount of carbon emissions a coal-fired plant would generate if they had produced the same amount of energy. In total, we predict we will divert over 9.5 million metric tons of carbon emissions over the life of our operations. And finally, we calculated the economic impact to the local communities by looking at the actual construction costs as well as the revenues generated to the local governments during the life of our operations. And this totals about 50 million US, or about 3.8 million per site. So in conclusion, we ask for your endorsement along with our anchor commitment in supporting RiverGen. We believe we assembled a proven management team with a strong business model coupled with attractive returns both on the financial as well as the social returns. And in conclusion, we've actually already secured a $5 million anchor commitment and recently was selected as the winner of the 2013 Asia Forum for Clean Energy Financing, which was a competition of over 100 businesses collected by the Asian Development Bank and the USAID, in which we are one of the 2 winners. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your questions.
Please, judges.
I have a number of questions. I think I'll start with this one. You have impressive backgrounds and are going for, a fairly ambitious number, a total raise of $185 million. why wouldn't it be a lot easier to start with, say, starting with 10% of that? Raising $6 million in equity and then a much smaller amount in debt, get some people kind of interested and engaged, learn that they're getting a good return on investment, that you can prove yourselves in this market that's often in many countries highly regulated. There can be a lot of political risk involved. Why are you starting so big?
That's actually a great question. And the main reason we've been targeting this size portfolio is actually from our conversation in investors. We've talked to a number of both clean energy and social funds, and all of them said, look, given the market opportunity in Indonesia, we would love to be able to invest in mini hydro. But what they can't do is go down to individual sites, to the 10 megawatt portfolio that you're talking about. Basically, the number we have heard from a number of investors is, look, bring us a minimum size of a 50 megawatt portfolio, and we'll be happy to give you the money. Anything smaller than that, they just don't have the time to do the actual due diligence, and are actually looking for companies like RiverGen that is looking to essentially consolidate the industry, and so that's why we set such an ambitious target.
Yeah. Actually, additional to that, we actually have experience in mini hydro sites also. We have previously developed mini hydro sites, so we already know the industry, we already know the regulations, who to talk to, who to engage to. So we have experience also doing the mini hydro sites. That's why we want to combine the two existing company to have both the experience directly.
I have a question. On page 22 of your business plan, you say that you're not going to get involved in connecting to the grid, but you'll collaborate as part of corporate social responsibility programs to deliver energy to 100,000 rural households. I'm baffled. What makes you convinced that the energy that you generate is actually going to get to the rural households and make the social impact that you're claiming?
That's actually a great question. The main reason is before you're allowed to actually build a mini hydro site, you actually need to get permission from the local bupati or the mayor, it's the mayorship of these regions. And for them, if they're going to grant someone to build a mini hydro site, and if there is no electricity within their mayorship, they're not going to grant to a hydro developer unless we will say, yes, we will actually work with you to develop electricity. Because in the next election, if they do something like that, they're going to get elected right out. And a lot of the bupatis that we have been talking to, that is typically one of their conditions. The only reason we don't put it as part of our business model, again, has been coming from investors. It's, their perspective is, once you start getting to actually doing the hooking up of electricity, doing the billing, and more importantly, the bill collections, that is the quickest way you can have a community turn against your project. And oftentimes you'll see communities with these sites will actually go and actively destroy the mini hydro sites, or as we mentioned in the upstream area, will just do whatever they want, which will then harm the financial performance of your site. So that is the main reason we haven't included it as part of our business model, but we do know we will have to do it because in order to get the license, we have to work with these bupatis to electrify their areas because that's why we're getting licenses.
So as an investor, of course, one of the things that makes you quite nervous is when there are pretty big elements outside of your control, you as an entrepreneur, that could dramatically change the business model. So if I think of the fickleness of government and their pricing on electricity and whether they like you or not, I'd love to know more about how long the contracts are, how they're guaranteed, what kind of relationships you have there. And then there's the whole element of the environment and a large flow of water that's required to power this. So, what happens in regard to droughts? I appreciate the mitigation you're doing around the upstream river, but there could be forces beyond that. So is there any risk mitigation you guys take for those types of things?
I'm going to talk about the tariff, the regulation. For the tariff itself, right now it's already guaranteed for mini hydro and for renewable energy. The government of Indonesia is supporting it. So it is a fit-in tariff, so you have to pay it. So we don't have to do the negotiation on the tariff itself. So it's more faster. And also the period of the 15 years period is also common because we have the experience of doing that for 6 PPA previously. So the engagement of the government right now is getting more stable because they are really encouraging the renewable energy.
Maybe I just add a little bit about the government risk. I think it's actually the smaller the size of the plant, the less risk of government intervention also. This is why we chose this particular market, because for a plant under 10 megawatts, everything is guaranteed, the feed-in tariffs and everything. And like Darren said, usually the local municipalities really favor these types of projects as compared to the big ones. So we feel that risk is in particular reduced by the choice of our size.
And then in terms of the environment, so you're absolutely right. And this is why the first company in the Rural Energy Utama is so critical to the success of this company. Because really when you're doing a run-of-river site, the two important factors are the geological conditions and the hydrological conditions. And really, you're only as good as your engineers. And because our team has, each of them have over 20 years and they've done hydro projects from 200 kilowatt sites all the way up to 200 megawatt sites, they actually know how to do this. And that is our primary risk mitigation, is our team, we know, is probably the best in Indonesia right now to assess what you are exactly addressing. And that all comes from during the design and the evaluation phase of a site. If they come back to us and say, this site is no good, we will just move on to the next one.
I wanted to ask actually a little bit different question about really scaling up. At the beginning you said there's something like 20,000 megawatts that are needed. Your project's already very ambitious and there's a lot of money at scale, but even if you succeed, you're not even at one, you're barely not at 1%. What would it take to really scale up? And the corollary question is, how do you drop your costs? Because you're more expensive than solar right now, if I'm doing my numbers right, per watt, something like $2 a watt. But what could you do, and is there economies of scale where you could dramatically lower your costs to get anywhere close to coal or some of the other alternatives?
So I'll answer the first one and then let Arnold talk, because he's actually looked at a number of different renewable projects. In terms of to get, to meet the 200 gigawatts, I mean, our company, one of the vision is, if we're successful, we're hoping to have other copycats. Because right now, everyone wants to get in the mid. There's so many investors sitting on the sidelines saying, we want to invest in mini hydro in Indonesia. But they cannot find a company that is doing it, nor has there been a proven model. If we are successful, we will show that you can do this in Indonesia, and we'll bring in a lot more money to reach that target. And Arnold will talk about the costs.
So, right now the solar cost, maybe in the industry around the world, it's already cheaper than the hydro, but in Indonesia itself, solar right now it's less attractive because the tariff itself is not as high as the hydro projects right now. The other thing is the solar is not stable actually in Indonesia. So because of the clouds and everything.
Actually, I don't need the solar. I'm just wondering, if it takes $185 million to create 100 megawatts, it's like $1.85 a watt. I mean, I'm just doing math. So is there a way, how do you get down to 50 cents a watt? Or what would it take so that you could start really scaling up without needing enormous amounts of capital?
So it's both it's a double-edged sword, right? The nice thing about hydro, the technology hasn't changed for the last 20, 30 years, nor will it likely. So if you're looking at technology risk, it is what it is. It likely will never change. So on the flip side, when you're looking to reduce the cost, it really comes down to how well can you manage the construction process, how well can you actually, when you're doing the design, be as accurate as possible. And again, that's where the secondary company comes in. They have been doing this for over 20 years. And so we are relying on them. And so we do know that $2 million actually for us is very conservative. Arno has actually seen a number of hydro projects where the cost is basically down to 25% cheaper than that. But for our estimates, we've just used a very, very conservative estimate of $2 million per megawatt.
Just one question about competitive landscape. So I'm sure it's a business that a lot of people want to get into real estate company. Can you summarize what makes you different or better than?
Yeah, and I think because we're almost out of time, so I'll do it very quickly. We actually looked at over, I think, 50 companies. We did our own market research. And what you see is most of these companies, they only have the ability. So when I showed the 3 slides, the 3 circles, they only have one of those components. Most of the mini hydro developers out there right now typically are families who are leveraging all of their equity to either purchase the license or get the feasibility. Most of them can't. The number of acquisition sites that we have actually been talking to are these small developers out there that don't have the money to take all the way to the next stage, nor do they have the construction management or the technical expertise. Most of the mini hydro developers you talk to right now are relying on consultants to do their feasibility and design. So they are literally saying, oh great, here's our feasibility study, but they have no clue if it's good or bad. What our team brings, it's when we have to bring consultants in because it's required by regulation, they can immediately tell, yes, this study is a good one, and if it's not, tell the consultant, go back and do your job right, because this is unacceptable by our standards.
It's a current $5 million investor. Is that an institutional, individual, or what type of funder?
Yeah, so it's actually a publicly listed construction company, which is one of the biggest risks in this. That's how we can scale. Is to reduce
Thank you.
Thank you very much.